Hi, I'm Richard Vague. Last week we shared data showing how Americans are the best savers among the major countries in the world, in spite of decades of headlines claiming Americans are poor savers compared to other countries. These claims are based on a view that defines household saving as the amount of income in excess of that year's expenses, which is an incomplete approach. We take a more comprehensive approach reflective of a natural and intuitive understanding of savings by defining it as the amount households have in their bank accounts, plus their stock portfolios and the other assets they own, less their debt. In other words, their net worth. On that basis, U.S. households are on top on a U.S. dollar per capita basis, as you can see in our chart from last week. This week, we will factor in the difficult reality of inequality, thanks to data from the World Inequality Database, which allows us to look at the net worth distributed across wealth percentiles for the Big Seven. First, let's look at the bottom 90% of the population for each country. Examined this way, Americans are still the best savers, but not by all that much. The U.S. net worth per capita is $138,000, but the U.K. is a close second at $117,000, with France, Japan, and Germany not far behind. Now let's look at the top 10 percentile of households in each of the Big Seven countries on a dollar per capita basis. For this strata, the U.S. is well above the other countries, as we can see in this chart. The U.S. top 10 has a net worth of $3.27 million. France is a very distant second at $1.5 million, and India registers a relatively minuscule $67,000. So we see that the big advantage in average net worth of all Americans versus the citizens of other countries is primarily due to the huge difference among the top 10%. Now let's look at the disparity in the net worth of the top 10% versus the bottom 90%, which is one way to measure the level of inequality within each country. As seen here in the U.S., the top 10% is 23.7 times wealthier than the bottom 90% on a per capita basis, or 3.27 million compared to 138,000. Which is the largest disparity of the Big Seven, whereas in the UK, Japan, Germany, and France, the other developed countries, it is only about half of that. Let's call it 12 to 13 times. In India and China, which are less developed and have the reputation of having pronounced inequality, the multiple is 16 times and 20 times respectively, which makes them actually and unexpectedly less unequal on this variable than the U.S. Why is this true? Well, we know that the single largest component of wealth for households is the value of equities and investment fund assets, including pensions and insurance. And if we look at this total for each country, the U.S. again has the highest value in 2022 at 352% of GDP, as compared to the 150 to 180% range for the next highest countries, as seen in this chart. As shown, much of that disparity has come just since the global financial crisis. Well, this is great news if you own stocks, but according to the Fed's distributional financial accounts, the top 10% wealth percentile in the U.S. owns a whopping 76% of all equities, an extraordinary skew, and the remaining 90% of the U.S. population only owns 24% of all equities, meaning they benefit far less from the boom in the stock market and thus miss out on that opportunity to increase their wealth. This is happening even as wage inequality has lessened in the most recent years. Good news, which has led The Economist magazine to crow that, quote, "This is a golden age for workers," end quote. But by looking solely at income, and omitting consideration of net worth, the economist is overlooking a crucial part of the equation. That's it for this week. Thanks.